I'd like to call the January 24th Lewes Board of Public Works meeting to order. First thing, pet pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A moment of silence. Thank you. So, roll call, all five members of the board are here. Barbara Curtis, Richard Nichols, Earl Webb.
Listen up.
Presley, our general manager, Austin, and our assistant general manager, Robin, Mike Hoffman, our solicitor, our legal, and Andrew Williams, the mayor. So, first item is the consent agenda.
The only thing is if you want financials pulled out, it's up
Right.
to you.
Does anyone discuss the financials?
I've looked through it. I can ask questions later. That's fine.
And then, Preston, do you want your report out?
I thought that was gonna be.
Yeah, it's gonna be on the 29th.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
Oh,
Yeah.
Never mind.
Completely up to you. I mean, if you want Kim to present the financials, she's more than welcome to do it, or you can just move forward as is.
I unless anyone,
Unless she sees a need for it, I mean.
It's,
They actually made money in the market, so I thought.
yeah, it's all good news and, the budget adjustments that I have it's gonna end up in a positive light for our year. Our cash is looking good, so. Yeah,
motion, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right, next, the Inframark report. I see Mike, you're here.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Mike,
Jeff can't make it. He's at a training that goes through 5, so apologize for that.
No worries.
Okay, so flows are up, obviously because of all the rain. The average so far in January 2024 is 1.39 million gallons a day. Permit flow is 1.5 million. During rain events on December 17th and 18th, pump station 4 was in high level condition for several hours. And the plant couldn't quite keep up. The EQ level was rising until we adjusted the backflush settings, which is a temporary measure where, the actual filtration's online more by adjusting those backwash settings. So we watched the TMPs and they were elevated a bit, but nothing alarming. So we were at max flow for about, I'd say 24 hours, a little more than 24 hours, and then started pulling the level of the EQ tank down.
So along the lines with precipitation, in the Viola report, they show a spike on January 1st, and I recognize that's not, their report is
Yeah.
quite.
That came up before, and they're aware of it. They double the flow for some reason on that first day of the month.
So does the data error.
There's a data error on their part, and we brought it to their attention a couple times, and it
Fantastic.
hasn't been
It
corrected.
just really stood out.
So
and to add to that, I mean, December was a very wet month. I mean, you had
Oh, yeah.
4-inch rain events back to back. And so when you experience these high levels and we adjusted, when we got them, I believe you guys had isolated the county off to reduce their flow to help us out at pump station 4.
Yep.
Because it was a constant surge and we saw it because we had the collapsed storm system on 4th Street. So we saw it too.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's flows are up, at this time of the year with all this rain. So on the 17th and 18th, we manned the plant overnight. The max flow on the 18th, or I'm sorry, the flow on the 17th was 1.4 million gallons, and on the 18th was 1.6. Any questions about that? Right, thank you. Filters, we're gonna push train 4 through another set of recovery cleans before the end of the month to address the elevated or reduced permeability results that were referenced in the latest insight report. So they have train 4 permeability marked as yellow. We're not seeing any real high TMPs, but we're gonna, when we did an acid recovery clean on train 1, it helped increase its permeability. So we're gonna try that for train 4.
An increase in fragging at this.
No, I don't think so. An acid recovery clean is going to remove inorganics, and that seemed to make the difference with train 1. So I think it's more of an inorganic fouling.
Yeah, I was wondering, train 2, which is being cleaned now. What are you seeing there?
We paused train 2 because of the high flows.
Okay.
So I'd have to refer back to Jeff. I mean, he didn't let me know, and the guys didn't let me know that there was anything increased or looked bad. So
Oh, is there a walkthrough tonight?
correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. 9 o'clock.
To add to that, the two things that Mike may hit on it. One, so it was JWC, right? That's who we met with today. Pretty sure that was the compactor.
Yeah, the compactor.
So the compactor is scheduled to be delivered sometime in early February. So they're gonna actually expedite that work, get the compactor in so that goes in session before we get to the summer season. That should help, especially with the maintenance part of having the dewatering dumpster out there. So we're hopeful to get that done. And even if they get that installed, get all that hooked up, they may leave and then come back. And then obviously one of the items on the agenda is for the change order for the top ring on the EQ tank, which Charlie had hit on. The other thing, which Mike may hit on, some people around the Canary Creek and New Road area may have seen us out there. We were running into some issues with a force main that we were struggling to get the pumps to ramp up and actually pump through. So Mike and his team were out there for about 48 hours, I think, for the total time of everything that was going on. But we ended up coordinating with the county. The county sent us a bypass pump. The current one that we had was at pump station 4. So they loaned us a bypass pump that we could hook up at 4. And after we turned it up, and it's a very powerful pump, we feel like we got her wide open and we're back to running at full capacity. So
I like to do a post there.
pump station 4 is doing good. This was a different pump station. This is out of Canary Creek. So these are the things you go through.
That clog we had, was that just because the flows are low and things are accumulating because of lack of flushing?
It's a long run.
Yeah, and
It's a really
You
long
don't have
run.
much flow through it right now.
No,
we never had an issue there until 2 days ago.
yeah.
Never. I mean, it's a newer pump station, but it's a long 4-inch force main. I think Jeff thought it was like 4,000 feet.
It leaves Canary Creek, makes the right, goes down.
But often when you start a new pump station, when you have low flows, you don't have good flushing because the flowing doesn't get all the way to the
Mhm.
exit point before it stops.
Yeah.
And it settles out,
Yeah.
and it clogs. Is that part of what this caused this?
I
I've
mean,
seen that happened a lot with this.
it could have been, I mean, Canary Creek is a build out. I mean, I think it was built out
So-
when we started.
Well, Canary Creek was in there since the 2010-ish,
Yeah.
and then Harbor Point was added, 2020. So
That's good.
Yeah,
Yeah, it should be flowing.
yeah. I mean, it's a little bit more flow there.
Mm.
I talked to Hans about it a little bit when we were kind of going over the bypass pump stuff and he had seen it. And George Lynch actually mentioned it too, is sometimes you'll get grease that gets built
Yeah.
up.
Oh, yeah.
But it's apparently as soon as they hook
That's
the
all
bypass.
residential though, so it shouldn't be
Yeah.
too bad.
Yeah, well, and
Yeah.
when they hooked that bypass pump up, they turned it and they said,
Yeah, I thought about that too. It could have been grease. I mean, it's,
yeah, it actually is.
somebody might have poured a bunch of, their turkey fryer into the sewer and it got cold as it was cold,
That's
last
the
week.
beauty of being able to call it. I mean, and we had Millsboro that assisted us too, so I gotta give shout out to
Oh,
them
really?
too. Yeah.
Okay. Pump stations, we received a new control panel for PS 17. We're gonna get that installed ASAP. Because we've talked about this before. I just want to bring it to the board's attention. PS 5 there on Connecticut Avenue. Water accumulates at that intersection and while we do get some inflow into the pump station, the bigger problem for us is we can't access it because of the water, being over top of the hatch and we can't open the doors. So just bring it to your attention. I know you know that's a drainage problem there.
Where are we on pump station 4, getting the generator? Where's that stand? There's no date in here, so I was just wondering.
A lot of it kind of rides around the fact of the decision of what happens with the wastewater treatment plant, because one of the solutions could be to pump back to that pump station. So I have a report that says about going out and buying a 100 kW generator, but it's a year lead time and probably $120,000. We also talked about a bypass pump, purchasing another bypass pump, because at the end of the day, one of the things that I've talked to Jeff about was, if you have a temporary generator, that's great, but if you lose one pump during a storm event or any sort of high flow event, one of those pumps can't keep up with the ultimate flow of that station.
Yeah.
That's why the pump.
What's that costing us to have that pump out there, emergency?
The generator?
Yeah, the generator.
1,700.
17 something.
1768.
Yeah.
So buying a bypass pump though, the wet well has to get opened with the bypass pump in.
The wet well's open now with a bypass pump in it.
So.
It's just open, it's staggered enough to get the single pipe down.
Right, I mean, during the summertime, because it defeats the odor control we put in there.
Yeah.
You noticed any others? I had somebody complain.
Yeah.
To me.
I heard mostly from Dogfish.
What's going on there, do you know? Why is there odors?
It's open,
They have that filter there. Can we,
but it's open now.
Yeah.
That's the wet well's open with the bypass pump in.
can we kind of close that up a little bit?
I mean,
It's just the opening.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's open enough to put an 8-inch bypass too.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit,
What would it
Yeah.
take to make another panel
Yeah.
with a cutout for the pipe to go through?
Making it tighter fit.
maybe could.
Shame I have to have that unit there.
Yeah, I mean, we got the charcoal
Yeah.
filters and, I mean, especially
Yeah.
in summertime, it's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, currently we have it there because we were having some issues at PS4 and we had to replace the internal check valve to pump 2. So, and our crane truck is getting repaired, so we need that to pull the hose. But we'll get it out of there, until a decision's made, long term.
If there's complaints this time of year,
Yeah.
I can't imagine what's going to happen this summer if we don't get that tightened up.
And then PS 19, they had one of those old junction boxes, those octopus junction boxes that broke off the conduit and, we removed we got contractor to remove that, junction box and pull new float switches directly into the control panel. So there's no junction there. So eliminated that. And solids handling, the digester building power feed project was completed the week of December 11th. All equipment online and functioning properly.
So
Yeah.
my,
Hold on.
so, go ahead,
What?
Barbara.
What happened with digester 2 in November that there's no data reported?
Oh, well, it was down, so we had it so low that you couldn't take a sample. We weren't using it. And that was during the digester issue. We were trying to get both the digesters empty before the contractor started his work, but because we were hauling a lot also just from what we were wasting from the plant, well, we were not able to get digester 1 completely empty, but digester 2 was for the most part completely empty.
So, Mike, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but have we ever found the beggar data from last summer before the failure?
What Jeff told me that it had, the unit that we purchased has a pass or fail. So, we pass all except for the digester building. So,
We
we're,
don't actually have beggar numbers.
I can look into the criteria for a pass fail, into the instructions of the Megger, but we need, my next topic is the electrician. When we were trying to find an electrician, criteria we were looking for was somebody who could, be very independent and explaining the projects that we expected, measuring, preventive maintenance stuff at the pump stations. So that's what, that's our expectation, moving forward. Somebody, Andy was great, mechanically and electrically, but record keeping, not so great. So,
Like, because I mean, the Nichols beggar, I mean, it shows it's failed. I
Mhm.
mean, but it's got mega readings.
Mhm.
And I would have expected,
it most likely gives a reading, but like I said, he saw pass fail. He said, it pass is good. So
and I just.
apologies for that.
It may have passed, but it was at the marginal
Yep,
edge.
yep.
I really would like to see mega date, the numbers.
Okay.
Possible. Thank you.
And moving forward, that's the expectation. And then we did make an offer and it was accepted to a journeyman electrician out of Dover. He's got mostly new construction, but it's commercial and industrial experience, so no residential. So we felt like he was the best candidate that we interviewed so far. We expect him to hopefully start before the end of the month, as soon as he gets through background.
Question, Mike.
Mhm.
It seems like I keep reading about locks being missing on the lift stations and pump stations.
We just received new set of locks that are all keyed the same for all the pump stations, and they're being replaced this week. Some of the pump stations never had locks. Some of them, they have wooden doors with no locks. But that's guys are making observations as they're doing the pump station checks, and I will follow up with them to make sure that they're addressing any concerns. Any other questions?
Just a nit, but on page 6, you got a typo. It's the operation of December. And then the first paragraph talks about November.
No, I'm sorry.
It's
Yeah.
pure nit. Just, want to make sure it gets noted. Was all I had. Anyone else?
Yeah, I had a question in the maintenance
Mhm.
expenditures. It's a silly question. What does DEF stand for?
I had to ask the same one question. So it's an additive that they're putting into diesel fuel to
Okay,
keep it.
For the emission system, it's used for the emission system.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Mike.
Thanks.
Moving on. Oh, me. The president's report. So, we had the holiday party for the BPW staff and it was well attended and it was, one way of us being able to show the staff, how thankful we are for the work. And, it's been a heck of a year for them. And, I guess one call out to the staff is during all the, wind events, we've had storms, we've had zero or
Yeah.
maybe one transformer pole top failed.
Take squirrels out
Squirrels
and
and birds.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe no, I mean, as far as the storms
Yeah.
go. The light stayed on in Lewes. So I think the staff really deserves quite a bit of praise, and so do Austin and Robin, so. Then the mayor and city council. We've had discussions with GMB. We had a joint executive session with the city last week. BPW city leadership meetings ongoing, once a month. And, the joint BPW mayor and city council workshop on capital projects was last week? No, was it this week?
Go this week,
Yeah, it was
Monday.
Monday.
It all blends.
yeah, it's, all right. Austin?
Donovan Smith, always a key project. No real update other than there's still 20 people connected. They're doing their deepest sewer work as they work away from Central Avenue. And then once they finish that up, they'll start coming back and doing connections still November of 2024 completion. Obviously, we hope for sooner than that, but we're moving along. Press, Barbara and myself met with the EPA and we're going through their create tool and their risk assessment. So we're looking to have another meeting next week, and then we'll just update everybody along with the process. They've been great so far. Very interesting information that they have, and they have a lot of data. We would be the first community in Delaware that would be taking advantage of it. And what they do is they walk you through this process, and then you can utilize this, in multiple iterations on your own. But then they'll bring in funding partners so that you could go after funding if we so wish. And they even gave us some insight on lead and copper funding that's out there that they passed information off to us for.
So you should probably send that summary of that meeting to the other board members.
Yeah,
They did a nice summary. They also have a recording, but I don't think they want that widely distributed because it's password.
yeah.
It's 2 hours. I don't think anyone's gonna listen to it anyway.
I need somebody to put me in bed.
Well, you can get a copy.
Other highlights submitted the tier 2 reporting for chemicals and hazardous waste, which is an annual thing. Met with DENREC officials regarding the proposed fee increase for House Bill 249. I suspect you'll hear that more frequently and more often. It's a pretty sizable increase to existing fees, and there's a lot of details that need to be ironed out. But from what was put out there, had a lot of sticker shock for a lot of communities, especially with fees that weren't ever passed on to municipals or government entities that now are assumed to be passed on. It's not been passed. It was brought up last legislative session, but it's fully expected to be brought forth in this legislative session. We also met with Patrick McCoy to start the discussions of strategic planning. We are eyeing up February 5th. I know I pulled all you guys for dates. February 5th is going to be the day, and you'll probably get a set time that works for you where you would come in and meet with them. They'll also meet with staff and just go over some discussion topics. And then we're probably also going to send a survey out to all customers. And we'll also send it to key accounts so that we can get feedback there too. So we're working through all of that as we speak. Obviously held the joint capital projects meeting with the city. We also are doing our UCMR 5 testing in February, which is the unregulated chemicals. It's just the 5th iteration of it. That will be biannual testing. That will start. It will be the first round of testing will be in February, and then we'll do it again in August. That's pretty much it.
All right, and then, so now we're on to new business. Open forum, general discussion on the 2024 election. Austin?
Chris, do you want it's summary.
Just that way, it opens up on February 1st, it'll be in the paper on Friday.
And what we did want to, I connected with Mike. One of the things we wanted to add, just as a future item when we put this out there is under the vacancy exists for 3 board member seats for 3-year terms. It talks about how someone could become a candidate in the election file and how they can file. We've talked about just adding alternatively for the other option of having 5 of your closest friends or colleagues nominate you.
Yeah, and so the way the charter is, there's essentially it's bizarre, but there's essentially 2 ways to get on a ballot. You can submit your own, you can nominate yourself, or if 5 people nominate you, you can be placed on the ballot.
Fun fact.
So long as you confirm that you support the nomination. So that's what the charter says. That's why it's on the notice, and just making clear that that's an alternative way. It's not that you have to have 5 people nominate you.
Yeah, everything's correct with it. We just said about just adding the word alternatively. There's really 2 different options.
Mayor Becker, I see you're coming in.
So in other words, you have to make sure that you don't have more than 5 enemies in town, otherwise you're gonna be nominated. All right. That was a joke, by the way. Item 8, open forum general discussions on the request from Theodore Becker to consider a reduction in the readiness to serve charge for water and sewer for his property at 108. And it should be corrected, Ted's letter does say 108 and 110. This was published before the letter came in. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Austin to discuss and.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I provided a summary to you and you have the letter. Existing policy is we bill off of meter size, and the request that's come in from Ted is essentially during the time of install, the meters that were installed on the fire line that also provide domestic usage, and they're 1.5 inch. And so I believe the request, and Ted, you can correct me if I'm wrong at any point, is to actually view those meters as more of a residential style meter size as a 1 inch instead of a 1.5, to reduce the fixed charges, because the consumption charge doesn't change. It's the fixed piece. So the request before the board is, and what would be the word, Mike? It would be an exclusion from the policy or exception to the policy of how you build today to take exception.
So just to back up with Austin just said, so today, the conventional way of installing a fire suppression system is there's a separate fire tap, which is unmetered, and then a domestic water tap, which is metered. In this case, back in the day, for whatever reason, we're not going to go into, they brought the 1.5 line in, and they're feeding both the fire suppression system off the back end of the meter and the domestic water. So, when Ted and I discussed this, the option of downsizing the meter to a 1 inch or a 5/8 inch meter, they wouldn't meet the fire regulations without ripping up the road and the sidewalk to replace it. So it's an existing design, I'm gonna say deficiency. From,
I would call it an anomaly.
Yeah.
That, at the time the building was built in 2006, there was, thank you all for listening.
introduce yourself, Ted.
Ted Becker, the person who built this building, and at the time the building was built, that was determined by the engineers who were working on it that there wasn't sufficient water pressure to operate the fire suppression systems. And there was no inquiry made about a separate fire suppression meter or anything like that. So they installed 2 1.5 inch water meters. So in the interim, several years, more than 10, we've been paying an increased fee for the basically a commercial rate for the 1.5 inch meter. And the unit 110 has recently changed hands. And the person who is occupying that meter or occupying that residence called to my attention, look, this is very different than what I'm used to paying when I used to live on Savannah Road. And so investigating, it's basically double what the normal residential rate would be. And so there is no commercial operation there that would warrant heavy duty commercial meters or supply of water. So it's an anomaly. It may be the only building in town that has this situation.
And I will add, we do have, that I know of, at least one other customer that has a residential at 1.5, or at least a 1.25.
Are they linked to fire suppression as well?
No, they're technically outside the city. On paper.
Does that give them more flow, more water pressure in
Yeah.
in the house? Yeah. That would be nice.
What's the cost difference?
It was outlined in the letter from a ready to serve perspective. It's essentially double the difference between an 1.5 and an inch.
So the ready to serve water is 2150 for a 1 inch and 44 for a 1.5 inches. And the sewer is 5650 for a 1 inch and 110. So it's basically, as Austin just said, double.
So that's just the fixed costs, right?
Those are
Otherwise,
fixed
yeah.
costs,
Okay.
has nothing to do with the actual consumption of water
Okay.
or what's going, the 80% that is charged for going into the wastewater treatment.
Remember, the readiness to serve is maintenance on the systems. It's not.
And as Austin noted, or Tom noted, the meters are installed in the sidewalk. It would entail having to redo all of that, plus completely redo the interior supply.
Are you asking for just the water or wastewater too?
I would ask for both.
So water and wastewater for reference.
Okay. Any other questions? I'd be happy to answer.
It's a slippery slope. If this is
Yeah.
one off and had fire suppression, that's an involvement.
I guess I have a little bit of a problem with it. If they have better water pressure, maybe they should be paying for it, but maybe not the sewer. Ready to serve. I don't know.
I'm not sure that there was ever a problem. I mean, if you put a 1 inch meter in, you wouldn't have a problem with domestic water.
No, I mean, you're gonna have pressure within the
It's-
system.
The pressure is all for the fire suppression system. They're not getting any benefit from it on the domestic water side.
Oh. Okay. Do they have, is there a fire suppression system there?
Yes.
Yes. And so the problem is there weren't 2 meters installed.
There were
There, oh,
2 larger meters installed. The actual,
Per
yeah,
unit.
yeah,
One
so
per
one,
unit.
one
Oh.
per unit. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Ted. I think the fire suppression exists in the commercial space,
Also residential.
but the water itself services the residential piece. For context. So the two meters service the residential second story units. The lower story units, which is the commercial, get served through the fire suppression. In typical applications, you don't meter fire suppression. In this case, everything is being metered through these 2 meters.
So Barbara, remember the tour of my house? When you went downstairs, there's 2 water lines that come through the front wall, one for the fire suppression system, and that is not a metered line. That's just directly tapped into BPW. Because there's no normal flow in it. It's only during emergencies. And the second one, we have a 1 inch line, and that is domestic, and that's got a meter on. So that's more of the conventional method of doing it now.
right.
Yeah, the way that it works is if you have a single domestic line coming in most cases, you tee off the single domestic line and that pressure can suffice a fire suppression service. If you need something separate, you just do a separate tap that's dedicated fire suppression. Either way, it's not metered.
So there's only one other instance of this.
No. I'm saying on a residential basis, we do have meters that are all the way up to 1.5.
Okay.
So that we do have 1.5 inch residential meters within the system.
Those three, a lot of showers.
Were those before fire suppression? There's no fire suppression in those, though, are there? No, it's just a big house.
So, Mike, can you talk a little about the
There
precedent
is one down at the
and
building on Bay Avenue that they put a 1.5 in, and they also put a separate, line in for their fire suppression.
Brand new house on massive house.
can you talk a little about the precedent this would set if we did do something here? And, you know, the slippery slope, I don't know, slippery slope.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to be very careful and aware that when you have a policy and you start making exceptions to the policy, that the exceptions become precedent for the basis of future requests. And so if an applicant, if the rationale for this applicant were supported and granted, and you had an applicant with the same situation that came forward, then the question for the board would be, if you didn't grant that, what's the basis for not granting that and for granting this? That's why as a general recommendation, when it comes to policy, the recommendation is to follow the policy unless you see a basis to change the policy. Now, I will say that whenever, as you can do the best you can to adopt a policy that accounts for every scenario, but inherently there are situations that warrant a request, that warrant a closer look. And that's why there are processes in place to appeal to the board to do that. But those should be, as a general rule, few and far between the exception to the rule, and rooted on a basis that you look at this and say, yes, this is an anomaly, in fact.
Under our
So-
present codes, could this be done again? I mean, could you do this intentionally going forward and still meet the codes?
Well, actually, it's fire code, fire marshal's code.
No, you wouldn't, because you would have to have a separate, for a commercial building, you would have to have a separate fire line.
Unless you're in the state park.
They own their system, so.
So I'm saying probability of this specific situation recurring would be less. Or
Yeah.
non-existent, because they'd be violating another code.
Yeah, but I mean, to play devil's advocate, you also, if you were to do this, the same tenant, in theory, could increase their flow to utilize an 1.5 inch service, and then they would be benefiting from an 1.5 inch service. And you would be billing them for a 5/8.
But to go
They
back
still have an 1.5 inch no matter what you do.
Yeah.
You're just theoretically.
And I'm just saying that could this be repeated intentionally going forward and still meet our codes?
actually, I'm more concerned, I think the question is more pertinent. I mean, because going forward, we're getting a say in it upfront. But are there any other, if this is truly just a one-off anomaly, to Mike's point. Is there any other anomalous conditions out there? And I don't mean the residential, the 1.5 inch meter. Is there any other that we just don't know, that we don't know about?
Are there other tenants in this building in addition to these two people? Or,
Oh, the storefronts.
okay, and they're all,
And, yeah, I should point out that the condo documents also prohibit any commercial operation that would involve food service, which would be the thing that would normally trigger an inch, or the requirement for an 1.5 inch meter in a building of this size. And so the documents that were developed for the condo association that owns the building or that operates the building prohibit any kind of, now that could be changed going forward, but the probability of that occurring is probably negligible.
Well, Mike, could we make it, I mean, if the board's view was to go with the waiver, a condition that they can't draw more than a 1 inch meter worth of water?
So the question becomes enforceability. I mean, the answer your question on condition, yes, you can condition it. You would want to make sure that you document it. But then the condition has to actually be something that can be enforced. So
Well, but
that's,
we have we do meter reading, so we know what the consumption is. And we know what you can get out of a 1 inch line.
Then you're adding, I mean, to add to that is I'm again not playing devil's advocate, then you have 3,500 accounts and these two accounts, you're gonna have to look at every single month to view it.
Retroactively.
If I can ask, so just because this triggered my question, to Chris's point, so the house on Bay Avenue that has the 1.5 and the fire, but the fire suppression line is separate from the 1.5, correct?
Or teed off
It's
of.
being built right now, so it's brand new.
Right, so the issue here is that it's a 1.5 that feeds your domestic line and your fire suppression line. So the clarifying point would be, could be, and I'm not advising one way or the other, but to answer this question, so that a condition is that that line, so long as that line feeds the fire suppression and the domestic, this waiver is in place. The moment the fire suppression is separated from the domestic, then you have to pay the meter that feeds. Does that make more sense?
Well, one of the solutions, and Ted hit on it, is that you really, the waiver request comes as an alternative to having to put in a T and install a separate meter, and you could essentially put a bypass jumper in for the 2-inch line, because it's a 2-inch line with a 1.5-inch meter.
And why is that not an option?
The cost and the disruption to the building.
That's the,
And the street, I should say, because it
You
would have to, you'd have,
So
you wouldn't have to cut the street on thing.
maybe not,
Because you could stay behind the curb stop
but you,
in the side, you're taking sidewalk up.
So just playing the opposite devil's advocate is, it's really to the owners, a cost benefit between continuing to pay the readiness to serve charge or put the capital out to change it.
Right.
That's the other side of this.
Have to pay you the big
First town
bucks.
in the
Yeah.
first state.
okay. Any other question?
But they would still be paying the ready to serve charge, but only based on a 1-inch meter.
Correct.
Yes.
Which is appropriate.
And this would be only from today going forward, not retroactive back to some prior time.
I'm not asking to go backwards at all, I'm just asking to from this point.
Or in other words, give the lower amount for a year or two. And then it goes back up.
It's just have to make notes.
Put them on your hand. I saw that the other day.
It seems to me that maybe the landlord should pay that cost because it's the error of the building.
Privately owned.
Privately.
Oh. Yeah, it just.
It's a one-off anomaly, it seems to me. I mean, as much as I hate to, overturn policy. I don't know.
This should not have happened.
Right.
It shouldn't have happened. But we're at.
A lot of things that shouldn't have happened.
All the time.
Yeah, so someone made a mistake and they want the BPW to pay for it.
Just so you know,
Basically.
1.5 inch meter goes, guess who's putting the 1.5 inch meter back?
Like, say this again?
So we own the meter, so it's 1.5 inch meter that's in there today, based off of what was requested by the property owner. But if the meter goes and needs to be replaced, we're putting 1.5 inch back. Even though we're billing off of 1 inch. That's what I'm saying, yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Replacing
Yeah.
the tank. That's all.
If you are even going down the path of an exception, and one thing that you probably want to think about, if you're going to put something in some sort of document, is that if the purpose of the ready to serve is that you have the ability, that person has the ability to draw 1.5 inches worth of water. 2 inch, 6 inch, whatever it may be. The purpose of that ready to serve is for that purpose. So what you're saying is you're going to reduce down to a 1 inch. But that person still has the ability to draw 1.5 inches.
But just to clarify, I mean, they don't, under the current configuration, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
Well,
They can pull 1.5 inches.
well, but the fire suppression, as long as the fire suppression system, this is my ignorance, and I apologize, but the fire suppression system, the issue is that the fire suppression system is tied to the same meter. So if the fire suppression system is tied to the meter with the domestic, then are they able to pull 1.5 as if the fire suppression system weren't there?
We don't know how the plumbing's configured inside, but in theory,
Let me ask you a dumb question. I can do that.
Easy for you.
Could we put an orifice on the domestic water tap off to restrict the flow?
yeah, but you can't, it's fire suppression.
No, but I don't know what the piping configuration is inside the house. I mean, if it comes in and it branches off to the fire suppression and a separate line going to domestic side, you could just put a restriction on the domestic side.
But we don't own that.
I understand that, but I'm making that as a. And it actually raises another question.
We only own the curb stop.
To Robin, this cross connect issue. Does this have a problem with cross connection? Yeah, I mean, are there check valves to prevent this fire suppression system? See, that's why I said it's gotta be bifurcated inside the building.
Yeah. The meter is your dual check, so that protects you between the private property, but inside, that's a whole nother story.
How much would a new meter cost?
The meter? A meter in a pit is what, 800 and
5/8 is 850.
between 850 and 950, depending if you do a 5/8 or a 1 inch.
Replacement of the existing meter? Oh, so he's looking for the raw meter cost.
Are you talking about for a 1.5?
No, for the size that it should have been for regular water.
It would be, call it, if you're just talking meter, 5, but you can't do that under the current config. You would have to put in a separate meter in a pit. Yeah.
And there's no way we could just get rid of the ready to serve or reduce the ready to serve for the sewer. Because it seems like that would provide some amelioration of the mistake without completely, we'd still be paying for the cost of the water meter and the availability of 1.5 inch flow. But if it's domestic sewage, I don't know. Is there any way you could do that? Just suggesting as a out of the box thought.
But isn't the sewage a function of the water volume?
You pay 80% of water bill.
Right, but the ready to serve is different. That's all I'm
Based off the
talking about.
meters.
Yeah.
And did the guy know that
I can't hear you, Chris. I'm sorry. You guys all have your mics too far back.
sorry.
Nobody can hear you.
did the resident know this when he purchased the condo?
And how, correct me, I don't remember, Ted, I know you, when were these buildings built?
2006.
2006.
And the two previous owners of the one unit that is now brought this thing in were only part-time occupants.
Mhm.
So this person and they had never lived in Lewes before.
So, Barbara's point,
Ah.
what does everyone feel about Barbara's? From a discussion, a compromise?
I think it's tough on
What is,
BPW, but if I understand your suggestion.
You're gonna have, we would have to manually calculate that bill
Ooh,
because it's all tied to the
Oh.
domestic water usage.
Mm.
Sewer is a device within the system.
Oh, okay. So there's no way that could be done like on a annual basis, you give a credit or something.
Laura would kick me in the shins.
Yeah, we don't want to get into that.
Yeah,
I started to
Yeah.
okay.
futz around with
Yeah.
bookkeeping, that just leads to.
Hmm.
All right, any other brilliant ideas? Richard?
So the option seems to be, yes, it's anomaly, and we grant the carefully worded anomaly for the ready to serve water charge.
No, both. You want, the request is for both.
Is it for both?
It's for both.
Water and sewer.
Because it's been in since 2006 and
Okay.
it's never come up before.
And from here on, any new or renovated project that wanted to kind of slide in on this anomaly would not be possible, given the policy and the current codes that the fire suppression separation.
Remember, so just so everybody's clear, the whole fire suppression for commercial is totally separate from residential. What the city passed is only dealing with residential. Commercial has always existed. I don't know the date. but yeah, that's always existed. So that's not new.
We could, to Richard's point, if it's not in our policy right now, modify our policy to say that fire suppression shall be separate from domestic water.
It's, you can't, the way that it's tied in is that you can't,
I don't mean for this property, I mean for going forward.
but I don't think in plumbing code you can. I don't think you physically can. The way that it's always been is you're teed off of domestic as long as you have service.
If the code says it, then we don't need a policy. But that means that going forward,
Well, our
no-
spec doesn't allow it either.
oh, okay. So there will be no more of these problems in the future.
For residential. This is where it gets, and I don't mean to get into the weeds, but you have a commercial building being served fire suppression in which the commercial service is feeding the domestic use up top. That's why this is the complexity of it.
Right, but still, couldn't we cover that in our policies, saying that thou shalt have a separate tap off of from fire suppression from domestic water? Whether it's a T or back to the main or however,
Or commercial.
Doesn't matter. Commercial,
For
you have to have it. Like that is a plumbing code, correct?
but
I believe it's residential over commercial.
Yep.
It's not, it has nothing to do with just being commercial. I think it has to do with residential over commercial.
Just to ask a question, because I thought that, so my understanding is now changing, just for the clarity of the record. I thought when this question was asked before, the conclusion, the answer was that this configuration could not happen today. Is that not true?
No, you can't, I believe the way the plumbing code works, you cannot have a meter on a fire suppression line. On a commercial building, you have to have a separate fire line. And then on any new residential, you have to have fire suppression service, and that would follow the BPW standard, which is to be teed off of the domestic line or a separate service should the fire suppression pressure not be good enough off the domestic.
so it sounds like what we need to do is verify that it actually is in the fire protection code, NFPA, to prevent this.
Charlie, I mean, am I not for commercial, industrial, I'm almost,
I think you put I think it's possible to put a meter on
fire
a
suppression.
fire suppression line, because I think some municipalities do charge for fire.
For fire suppression.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can do domestic usage off of a fire line.
But you understand, so the critical question here is if the configuration was in fact a mistake, that is an anomaly, that is not something that would be allowed. That's one situation. If what you're saying is that this configuration is acceptable, well, then you have a policy that sets the charge at the size of the meter. And so that's one of the questions that's before the board.
But it sounds to me like before we can make a decision, we need to close that open item.
Well, just so everybody's aware, responsibility of the Board of Public Works ends at the curb stop. So anything inside related to fire suppression has nothing to do with us.
But I'm talking about whether we could write a policy. If there's nothing there on the codes, we could write a policy that says thou shalt.
But what Austin is saying is that if after you get past your meter, if it's a plumbing code issue, that's not a BPW. And so again, I mean, the point here is, and that's why the policy is what it is in terms of the charge being based on the meter. Now, what you have is a request on a unique situation. And so the question becomes, is it unique? And if it is in fact unique, then the question, I mean, again, that's something to consider for the board. If it isn't unique, if this situation could be constructed this way, then you get into the question of the slippery slope and, can you make a justification that makes this different from any other situation that could happen?
I'm sorry for being dense, but it still seems to me to go back to, we need to go back and validate what NFPA says. And if NFPA prevents it, even though it's outside BPW's control, it can't be constructed that way in the future. And that would make this historic. Am I missing something there?
That's the will of the board. I mean, that's up to you all.
What I'm telling you is the responsibility stops at the curb stop. It even goes into fire suppression design. Fire suppression design gets sent to the building official. We perform a flow test. There's a standard for any sort of tie-in before the curb stop.
And I understand that, Austin, but knowing what our real risk is dependent upon, if the code doesn't allow it, even though it's outside our control, then they can't build it that way, and the risk to us is lower, is what I'm thinking.
What's the city, does the city has guidelines on this, right? Fire suppression? Are we covered all?
And any new construction would require it. So, as an example, that, for heaven forbid, were to burn to the ground and use new construction, I think maybe that's the concern as well. That's there, right? But yeah, now I think you'd have two lines, right? One for fire suppression and one for your domestic water.
But the city code, once again, only is for new construction residential.
Residential, because I thought my thought was commercial already always had the requirement.
And it is commercial downstairs, so
It depends on what you're doing, whether or not you have to have fire suppression. If you put where it triggers, if you put residential over commercial, which this building is, then you have to have. And that was not the requirement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But to the point, yeah, if you were to go to the building department now to get it, they would look at these things and determine which meters you need before they.
All right, so it's the pleasure of the board.
Does it ever get asked to do that by anybody, or is that just?
I think that's the issue we've wrestled with too, like plumbing inspections also are handled through you guys.
But plumbing inspections not past the curb spot, right?
Any. Any plumbing.
Yeah, that's a whole separate issue. The plumbing inspections are done by BPW, and we've been discussing that with the city for ages.
Based on the plumbing code. And so that is where the nuance is. That's right.
This building was built by a reputable builder contractor. they were following the code, it was inspected, so.
I'd rather they went back and fixed it, did it right.
Want to make a motion to that effect, and then we'll see what flies.
Okay, I make a motion that we disapprove the request and recommend instead that the building be, or the meter be changed to meet current code for fire suppression, breaking out the domestic supply. Two different, I don't fully understand how it all works.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, but just for the record, I mean, the motion is to disapprove the request. I think
Okay.
that's,
Good.
So
Okay.
is there a second?
But I struggle with it, I really do.
Yeah, I do too.
just when you have a motion, you need a second before discussion. If there's no second, the motion fails without a second. So now you go back to discussion.
So we're in discussion or? looking
You're in
for a second?
discussion until, and anybody can make another motion.
So now let's get a second motion.
Yeah, the thing has been there for several years
Okay,
and the
I make
buyer
a motion
should
that we
be aware of
accept
those
the
things
anomaly.
when you're buying something. So
So
it's been there.
Hold on, let's-
Accept
Right, hold on.
One
Okay,
conversation.
I make a motion that we accept the request.
can I make a if should the board be interested in going the route of granting the request, I would, of course, the screensaver. I would recommend a condition as a friendly amendment to the motion that there be no retroactive application, 1. 2, it be conditioned on the current configuration remaining. Should the configuration change, then the meter charge will be based on the current policy. And 3, if the meter is replaced or to be replaced, the configuration must change. Does that make sense?
The only issue is the last one, because if the meter goes bad, we're replacing the meter.
That's what I'm saying. If the meter goes bad, that where the BPW is responsible for replacing the meter, then that point, the configuration has to be corrected.
Which would mean they would be on.
Correct.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
So you wouldn't be replacing it with a
Correct.
1.5.
Correct.
I accept the amendment.
So now you need a second.
Second? Oh, no. Are we gonna turn this into the Speaker of the House?
The answer is yes, that's how this works.
There doesn't seem to be a good.
Sorry, Barbara, we've got a motion and we need a second before we
Second,
can.
Going once, going twice. Okay.
So now
We
it's
need a
discussion.
third one now. Earl, you're up.
I
We're going around the
don't
table.
think it's fair, but I don't know how to make it right.
Yeah.
That's my problem.
Yeah, and my only feeling was that it's been there so long and it's not been objected to. When the guy bought it, that was in place. Maybe he just overlooked it. I think I would overlook it, but he overlooked it, so.
Chris, I can't hear you. If you could.
Oh, I thought I was talking. Okay, I said, my feeling is that the thing has been in place for several years. Previous owners have used it and paid the thing. The buyer should have been aware of the conditions. The average person may not have checked it, but he should have been aware as part of his purchase of what he was buying and what the costs were. It probably should have been brought up at that time. So, and I don't see a reason to.
But then you're
Change it
agreeing
now.
with Barbara.
Yeah, well,
There is a third option. The third option is that to Earl's point, if you need more time, you can table. And then it becomes old business in the next meeting.
You get smarter between now.
Well, you might come up with other solutions. You're kind of throwing stuff at a wall now.
Yeah,
See,
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know what else would come to light between now and February.
I have to confess, this is a little bit over my head. And maybe with more time, I would understand better, but my impression is, okay, whoever put it in made a mistake. but it is a commercial building down below and residential upstairs. And I don't know how all that, I don't understand how all that plays into what size water meter should have been installed.
Make a motion to table.
Maybe somebody can help me understand it by then.
For second,
Second.
What was your motion?
Okay.
Earl? I didn't hear the
Table.
Just to table it and come back next session. Get
all right,
smart.
so we have a motion, Richard
Second.
seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. See you in February. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this one was. All right, moving on, item 9. Open forum general discussion on the easement agreement for Cape Henlopen School District. On this one.
Okay. Which half point you right on?
Austin's gonna correct me, so
Okay.
Austin, this is yours.
This is a easement that was prepared, working with Mike's office and also with the school district. We have a good working relationship with the school district. We have many easements with them. And so this easement actually covers, since they installed the track and field at the adjacent to the Fred Thomas building. There is an access issue that has been created with a line that extends from the end of Burton Avenue all the way into Sussex Drive, and then it turns 90 and turns into Sussex Drive. When Mariners Retreat was constructed, you still had access through it from the track and field, what is now the track and field area, which used to be an open field. Now that the track and field area was built, the question is, how would we be able to access it? This is a solution that we worked with, with Pete and with Mike and the school district, so that we would be able to maintain access to that line and that they would work with us with it. We did add in there the caveat of a potential future project of undergrounding that area just because of the amount of infrastructure surrounding where we would need to access. But this easement covers us for that time being and still allows us to access it, and the school district is obligated to provide that access to this easement.
I looked at this, but I couldn't figure it out. I mean, could you
The reason.
understand
so you-
where these parcels?
It's
that we
just
got?
one parcel. The
It's
easement,
all, that's all one easement.
yeah, because, good.
So the reason why, so the cross-hatched area is the easement. There's a track
I could see that.
that it goes around.
Why would have to be that?
because the improvements, so there's an existing track and it's the existing school district improvements. And so the easement is laid out to get from DuPont Avenue through the school district over to the utilities that are on the north side of that track.
Utilities are right here.
And
So why is
Austin,
all this part of the easement?
I asked the same question and it was just
I
for the
I
sake.
couldn't figure out what was going on.
It's
Right,
for access.
yeah.
It's for access. For our trucks.
Cause you can't back up.
You can't,
Correct.
So you have to get down the track? then?
yes, and the track is a gravel, it's a gravel track.
All right.
so
I couldn't figure out why this
This
crazy
easement-
easement.
this easement will allow for either overhead or future underground.
Correct.
So the easement covers both.
Yeah.
Eventualities.
Is there anything we're giving up that we shouldn't be giving up?
You're not, to be
Alright.
honest with you, no, you're not giving up anything. I mean, we worked through this with the school district. Again, it's a partnership with them and it's simply an access easement. There's no monetary exchange. There's nothing like that.
Yeah, it seems like you're taking in things that you really don't need. Is that kind of the,
So
yeah, wouldn't you come in here and go around?
No, because there's stormwater ponds right here, and stormwater pond right there. and
So how do you-
stormwater pond
How do
here.
you get there then?
You come in, DuPont.
Yeah.
Or
DuPont.
DuPont, make the right, make the left, go drive on the track and follow the track because there's a fence line all the way around the center.
Okay, well, you could, then the way you get there is here, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
But
why
there's also,
why do you need all this?
that is the primary line that frees the Fred Thomas building.
So just to add to this, Press, I mean, what I will say, and this builds off of Earl's point, the board isn't undertaking any obligation to maintain the easement area. You have to maintain your utilities, and if you damage anything, you're responsible for the damage, but you're not taking on any obligation. So in other words, you have the right to access through those various places without any obligation of maintenance. So it's better for the board's purposes and planning for the future to have the conservative look on the ability to access, recognizing that you don't have additional maintenance responsibility.
Could this impact anybody else's use of it? I mean, like this, I'm not sure if we're coming in this way, why you need this? I mean, it seems like an overkill.
No, that is the primary line that feeds Fred Thomas.
Correct.
You need, that
Oh,
needs
it-
to be.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
And to the
Yeah.
point of the reason why it's the whole track is the trucks and the need to turn around.
It's a
No,
tight
it,
area.
it didn't, wasn't apparent what was going on to me.
So utility facilities term is defined where?
It's in the body, Barbara. Let me find the page for you. It's paragraph 1 on page 2. So it says BPW utilities and appropriate facilities, accessories and appurtenances, including but not limited to electric infrastructure, whether overhead or underground, utility poles and other improvements, parentheses, the quote, utility facilities, which again, they're our facilities, so we are responsible for them.
Okay, great, because when I saw that we were gonna maintain the easement area, I was worried we were gonna have to maintain the track.
No. That is a great question and that's correct. I can clarify. Our responsibility is just utility facilities or if we damage. So if in the course of maintaining any damage, that's on the board.
Do I have a motion? Well, I guess first,
It's just a motion.
Yeah.
And then we would execute, the school district's poised to execute today, and then we would execute after that.
okay, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second? All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Any more update on the tower, the water tower? That's in part of this.
No,
No.
well,
And we've got that later. Okay, item 10. Open forum general discussion on the expectations for engineering services. So I'm not sure if everyone binders had both the list of responsibilities for the RPR and the subdivision. There should be 2 separate documents.
That include a different tab?
So
no.
this is the one,
Yeah.
and it was in Press's book, but it wasn't on in my book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
okay,
got
so-
it, yep.
Let the record show that the president was not given a full packet.
I could say so.
I second that
Okay.
motion.
Okay,
Sounds like Edwin Bob.
so, and we have Charlie O'Donnell here. Charlie, Vince, Austin and I, and I think Ben. Ben and me, not so much Ben. Have been working over the last several months. Because we don't have any real formal set of expectations, either for us of GMB or them of us. And so what we put pen to paper with was sitting down and writing up a list of roles and responsibilities, and that's what you have in front of you. So it's for discussion, comments, and, potential redraft if we need to. Austin?
and feel free, I mean, this is a culmination of what, Charlie, 3 months,
Yeah.
honestly, we've been working through. If you guys wanna take it and hold it for a month so that you can go through and add notes and come back, or you can distribute your notes to us, we wanted to put it in front of you, because this is what would be the guiding principles to any sort of formal agreement of services.
And, GMB was very cooperative, I mean, through the whole process. And I think it was a very open discussion on our expectations and,
Charlie, this pretty much,
I'll only add that, the one thing I wasn't prepared for was at the end of our discussions when Tom and Austin and Robin asked me if there was anything that the board could be doing better, but I will be prepared for that next time.
Well, the answer is no.
That's why we didn't have many
That's easy.
comments.
So moving on.
I'm sorry, Chris, I interrupted you.
These follow CDC documents.
Yes, they do, yeah.
So. they're-
Yeah, I mean, the major
Anything
subdivision.
anything left out or added in?
We probably did add some things in just from our own experience, our own localized experience. But I have to go back through and figure out what those were at this point, but not too much.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
certainly
As long as
the,
nothing was left out, that'd be.
Well, there were,
nothing was left out, no.
yeah, there were certain things that we did add in based
Yeah.
upon the previous experiences that we've had together. So
Yeah,
I read this a while ago, and I thought I had one comment that it didn't address, and I don't think the EJCDC documents do either, is when the person, the inspector, the RPR, I mean, is on site and for what type of work. In other words, things that can be covered up, he should be there, and
Mhm.
other things like in a pumping station where you can come back and check to make sure things are there.
Yeah.
Is that addressed in here? Do you?
no, we more address that in our specific proposals for that project. Based on a contractor schedule of work, and which we asked for a detailed breakdown of that schedule of work, and then we would put our hours associated with that, each one of those tasks. But particular to the project is how we usually handle
No,
that.
there's clients that concerned, and we all have this, that the inspector wasn't there, or that he was there, but he sat in the truck, things like this. And it should be in here, I think, to say when he should be out inspecting something,
Yeah,
like buried versus things that are
yeah.
exposed to the,
Well,
later.
we can have that discussion. I feel like there's certain clients of yours that, their whole objective is to make money, so they're always looking
I
to cut
agree.
back on anything that looks out for the board's
But if
best
we could
interest.
straighten out that in some language, you understand what I'm trying to get to?
No, I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
I think that's a very good point.
Yeah.
It's something we did not address
Yeah.
during the discussion. So I think that is something that probably could be flushed out. Austin, do you have any issues with that?
I have a note right here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions now, or we'll?
I had
Pick it
a
up.
question. I know that Sussex Conservation looks at stormwater issues, but I'm thinking of the stormwater issues we're having in the town now. I'm wondering if we should have something in here about stormwater. Because it's not,
In what way?
Are you talking about the inspector work, or are you talking about the subdivision plan review?
subdivision
Hmm.
plan review.
So
Yeah.
the city code has been updated to, and where our responsibilities lie in terms of during review of the preliminary and final plans is that the developers are required during the preliminary stage to establish a meeting with the Sussex Conservation District. And our responsibility as your engineer is to make sure that happens and make sure the results of that meeting get returned back to us so that we can share them with both the board and the city. Right now, that's where it stands. We don't have any review responsibility associated with the actual ponds.
Yeah. but I
One of the
think that-
pushbacks we've been getting from developers is, our RPR kind of cursorily reviewing the installation of the stormwater management facilities because SCD doesn't have the manpower to be out there all the time. And I've been down this road a lot where all of a sudden something pops up with stormwater management and not so much fingers pointing, but like what happened? Everybody wants to know what happened. So I've been instructing my inspectors to keep their eye on the installation.
So, Barbara, to your point, one of the issues, Sussex County Conservation District is a delegated agency from the state. And so their hands are somewhat tied because they can't go and put more stringent regulations in than the state allows them to. Because we had that discussion on several projects back when I was on planning
I
commission.
mean, the state regulations are very stringent. Now, whether they're updated to when we call 100-year storm or a 1% storm event, that's based on previous statistics, whether that's completely updated or not, that's not happening, but it's in the works.
Right, and that's actually the
Yeah.
point, is that like the berm walls in a stormwater pond. They're based on historical data. And December proves that we're not in historical nature. And so the risk of a berm getting breached in a stormwater pond is high, but Sussex Conservation District can't,
Yeah.
do
I
that.
mean,
Right, so couldn't
we
the
say
city
that it's
do
high,
that?
but we've never actually,
BPW do
to my knowledge, I don't remember experiencing a stormwater management device failing inside Lewis. We have a lot of other
Hold
problems.
on, let me
Granted.
write this down. So Charlie says the berms will never fail.
No, I didn't say that. I've never experienced them, yeah.
Engineers- So-
engineers don't make mistakes.
I'm sorry.
So
Mike.
there's no such thing as bad engineer.
Oh, that's, yeah.
So just because I think, and this actually goes into one kind of suggestion of this document as well, that I think would benefit some of the issues that we've had on the staff level is greater clarity of when GMB is wearing the city engineer hat versus the BPW engineer hat. And this is a perfect example, because, you know, when you're having the discussion and dialogue and these issues that Tom's mentioning, part of facilities and whatnot in planning commission, that's the city engineer hat.
Right.
When it pertains to the BPW and stormwater, it's stormwater that is impacting the BPW system. So it's anytime a project is impacting the BPW system, discharging into the BPW system or impacting our system, that's when GMB, as part of your scope with the BPW, is reviewing that and making sure that the BPW system can handle whatever that is in the scope of the BPW engineer. The BPW does not get involved or any review of the private systems, the design, the stormwater management that is handled through the Sussex Conservation District and the Planning Commission as part of that public process and that public review. So I think one of the challenges that we've seen comes up is when these projects get to construction phase, all those questions come to the BPW in terms of what GMB reviewed and the RPR and whatnot. And it I think just needs to be clarified for the BPW that when GMB is performing a service and a review for the BPW versus wearing the hat as a city engineer.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue because we could have separate contracts with both the city and the board, but it's just a whole nother set of, it's not that hard on our part, but a whole nother set of bills, that the developer has to deal with. But I mean, we could set it up that way. We have never done that in the past. I hate saying that, but yeah, we could set it up that way if necessary.
Yeah, Mike, thanks, Clark. I mean, yeah, being on both sides of the aisle on this thing, I was just bringing that up, that
And the reason why it's important is because it's important of everybody understanding and kind of who's doing what. Because if it blends, that's where you get confusion and that's where you get kind of these pieces. So, you know, Tom's question and Barbara's question, you know, this comes up in their roles on the city review, which makes perfect sense in the planning commission, but we need to be careful that we're clear in terms of when the stormwater conversation comes on the board and what GMB is reviewing at the board level.
Yeah, maybe I was thinking more of the city issues. Sitting as ex officio on the planning commission, you know, I hear horror stories about Sussex Conservation District. That
I don't think it's,
I've
I
heard
would
that
speak
they're,
up for the,
yeah,
I don't think that's deserved. Because, as I said, they are delegated by the state.
but my understanding is they're paid by the developers.
No,
No?
no, absolutely not. And here's the thing, if you were ever an engineer that had to go through SCD to obtain approval, you would not be saying that. They are really stringent
and difficult to get a permit through.
They have some very good staff. But they would rather that the 100-year storms were
Yeah.
really 100-year
I mean,
storms and
that's
not
a concern.
five.
Yeah, you've brought that up in the past, and that's a concern that's I think they're trying, well, the state's trying to address. Just so everybody's aware of the way it works right now, the city has taken the responsibility, correct me if I'm wrong, to set up the contract with the developer for review of the plans, preliminary review and final review of the plans. Once it goes to construction, it swings over to the BPW like Mike's talking about. I mean, yeah, there is some over, it gets to be a little bit strange. You know, you talked about like, we'd have to do a separate bill for one person out of 3,500. Now I got to go tell my inspectors that make sure that half hour that you're working on the street, you charge to this project number and the rest of the time. It gets a little funny, but I mean, it can be worked out.
Like, how does, I think it's laudable that you have your guys look at the ponds, even though we're not involved with them. But at what point do we take on the responsibility? That's always a liability issue. I mean, I think it's the right thing to do. It's the logical thing to do, but where does that put us?
And again, I think that's where the clarity is important because, you know, again, I can only speak to the board and your obligations and where that, but you know, I do know that as part of the subdivision process, the planning commission looks at stormwater management and asks questions about stormwater management. And I'm sure there's discussions and engagement with Charlie as his role as city engineer in stormwater management. And, you know, that's a city role, right? And to the extent that Charlie does or doesn't get involved, or what advice, where that is, where it goes to, again, that's in the plan review. That's not the BPW. And I think that's the point where when Charlie is reviewing a plan for the BPW and GMB is reviewing a plan for BPW.
I'm talking about in the field when they're.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So when the BPW's plans have an element where it's affecting the BPW system, where that infrastructure needs to be ensured that it is constructed correctly in the right location and it will be teed up for acceptance by the board, then GMB needs to be out there as part of the RPR in, you know, inspecting that and pursuant to the BPW plans as the BPW engineer. And so what GMB would be looking at in that instance is the BPW reviewed, approved plans that will be accepted by the BPW. And that is the BPW engineer hat. If as part of that engagement with the city, there's other things, again, we want to be clear that if that is happening and it's on the city, in the city role, that it's you, and again, the reason and rationale for this is to understand who is doing what, so that when we get the question of why is the BPW engineer charging for review of this, that we understand where that delineation is. Again, the BPW engineer is reviewing and inspecting.
But we're not picking up, and they're not picking up liability by looking at something like if there's some erosion on the inside of the dikes. And the inspector comes over and says something about it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It seems to me it's a good thing, but.
I'll just simply say you are my client and I will.
Okay, I got you.
I think we need more time to go through this.
This is simply a discussion. Now, this is, like I said, we've sat down, Charlie and Ben and all of us have sat down and put this together. We wanted to put it in front of you, have it be a discussion topic. We can come back to it. It wasn't meant to be kind of a decision.
Should this be something eligible for an executive session?
For this, no.
Said yes.
I said for this, no.
Let me
But
translate
it's in effect a negotiation of a contract, right? In some ways, I mean, it's.
What you're setting is you're setting expectations. What do you as the board expect the BPW engineer to do for you?
That's something we're gonna sign and they're gonna sign?
This would be the guiding principles that would be referenced.
Correct. What is your expectation in the subdivision process? Now, what you're getting at, Earl, is that there are elements, depending on where this goes in the process, depending on what your question is, that may be. But, you know, I think the product of this discussion is to have an indication of what your expectations are for the BPW engineer, ideally to help provide clarity to some of the questions the board has been receiving about, who's doing what.
Yeah, and I think just to reiterate, the intent of this was to bring the document to the board, discuss it, and we'll put it on a future agenda then, because we want everyone's comments incorporated.
Should we send our comments directly to Austin?
Actually, to the
Or-
baby.
Okay,
I'll
because
take,
We're assigning the baby to do the review.
How does this not come into context of a contract?
terms and conditions, yeah.
Can I answer that question in executive session?
And now you can respond, no.
No, I'm all in.
but this is more, I mean, we've had the meeting with, I mean, what did we start this? September, October, November, December, and we've built on this. This was a culmination of what, 6 months essentially.
Oh, and all kidding aside, I mean, just
Time well spent. It's really.
Yeah.
time
Yeah,
well
it's part.
just to just so the what kicked, and correct me if I'm wrong, what kicked this off is, especially, with all the projects that are going on, the questions in terms of, okay, we see GMB out there, are they reviewing for the city, or are they reviewing for the board? Or I see this charge here, where does that come in? What does GMB review in terms of the plan versus this? And just trying to get clarity in terms of what the expectations are. When we go to the acceptance process, as-built, making sure they're reviewing as-built, making sure that when we get a letter that says, yes, it's been inspected, as-built are here, easements, what are your expectations when you go through this process as to what you services and or what you would like to see your engineer provide? And so that's the purpose of this exercise. Now, if this becomes part of a contract discussion, again, that's a different layer, but this exercise is to have a discussion and clarity on expectations for the engineer in this process.
Did we start with looking at what other places or companies or organizations expect from their contracting engineers? Or, did we look at anyone else's documents, or is this just all from us?
Bye, Charlie.
So GMB's been around for 65 years now, so we basically invented these documents on the Eastern Shore and the downstate Delaware, and have built upon them over that 65-year period of time. So that's where we started from. No, we didn't go out and ask other municipalities, to my knowledge, about what they were
And
expecting.
it's a little bit to kind of play off that. It's a little bit unique because we have this two separate entities. So there are aspects that GMB serves at the pleasure of the board, and also GMB serves at the pleasure of the city. So
Yeah. Which I tried to,
Yeah.
well, not I, we tried to clarify that in these documents, some separation, because these are just related to the board's responsibilities.
Yeah, because actually, good point. I don't know how long ago, originally the document had all the city
Yeah.
and the BPW. And we had them strip out
Yeah,
the city stuff because obviously we have no authority over it.
Right.
yeah. Which, that's what I was used to on previous projects and things, so yeah.
All right, so I make the suggestion, we put this on the February agenda, or
our agenda's getting big.
I'm not gonna be here, so.
Me neither.
I'm out of the country, but I can dial in.
oh,
Curveball.
That is permitted. I mean, as long as you can participate virtually in the post-COVID world. But we do need to, at least 3 of you will have to be participating.
I can participate remotely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got neat anchors. So.
well, I want to know where everyone's going and I'll decide whether I'm gonna go.
Clear water.
No,
Harbor Island.
maybe, and no, I'm not going. All right, moving on, keeping this going. Open forum general discussion on potential change orders for the EQ tank bracing. So, Austin, this has
So-
been a long time coming and
Yeah, so I'll introduce it and Charlie's here to really kind of frame it up or, question wise. But this project has snowballed because it started with the headworks and it was one piece of the headworks and then it turned into essentially a complete headworks project. We went and got the funding and then we went for supplemental funding because the EQ tank started to show some deterioration of the top flange. So all the funding for this project has been secured. We really did not know where it was going to end up as far as cost. And so when we went back to the original contract holder, which was M2, we asked if this is something that would fall into their wheelhouse. And so they had actually contacted Penn Jersey and we had an initial meeting with Penn Jersey where they came out and inspected everything. And the solution in front of you, the original solution was supposed to be a single brace that would go all around the outside of the entire diameter of the tank. And I believe when looking at the numbers, when the tank is empty or very, very low, there was a question on whether or not the wind rigidity, I'm trying to think of the word, but would cause an issue at 135, I believe. 130. And so the request was to modify it to add the inside brace and the outside brace.
and all of a sudden that just jumped at me. The mitigation team's design is 120.
120.
So, so Charlie, one of the questions I had during this was,
Not a requirement.
What?
Not a requirement yet.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But
Recommendation.
Charlie, the reason for the truss inside now, is that to meet the original strength capacity of the original ledge?
Yeah.
It's actually increasing the strength of the upper tank?
It'll actually be slightly less than what the original tank looked like, not slightly less than what the tank is right now in the condition of that upper.
Yeah, forget about the condition now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Slightly less, but
really, even with the two trusses?
slightly less, but it's got such a conservative conservation factor on the section modulus, its ability to resist bending stress that, even though it's a little less, we don't feel it's a problem. Yeah.
And the fact that it's designed for 130.
130 miles per hour and the IBC current code or 2021 code.
Question, will we be able to operate with the tank half full or less than half full for them to do the inside work?
A lot of that comes down to coordination with the Inframark folks. We already talked with Jeff. I'm less concerned with the half full situation and more concerned of the vibration. And if those top flange pieces seem to fall off into the tank and how that will play a factor in, whether or not we clean the tank after the fact. But I think that this is a good solution to get us to where we make a formal decision on where we're going. I mean, it's $100,000. We thought it was gonna be a lot more. I mean, our supplemental funding was 350,000.
Yeah, I remember where we originally started was we would have to replace the tank.
Yeah, and this would make the tank last for how long? Do we know?
Well, it will be the strongest part of the tank. You have a report from 2020 that states that the tank should be replaced
25, I think.
2025 is what it says. This top part will get you 5 to 10 years closer to the 10 years on that part of it.
Barbara, you've been out there to see, you see the rust stains on the bolting for the plates. And
It just didn't make sense. I mean, at this point in time, we wanted to ensure that, that we're at a point where we support the tank until any decisions made by the wastewater treatment plant. I mean, we know GHD's report had a 3.5 gallon, a 3.5 million gallon EQ tank. And so this would be pennies compared to what that would look like.
Yeah, and that's the way I always kind of looked at it from a financial perspective is you're putting $100,000 into it versus I think I had calculated somewhere between 2 and 2.5 million for a new equalization tank. Yeah, and what by the time you demo and build a new foundation, et cetera. So I felt like it was a good investment to get you through the next 5 to 10 years until you make the decision and something happens.
There was one thing in the proposal that talked about there will be some original holes that will be visibly unused. Will they be doing anything to those holes to plug them or to keep them from, getting bigger?
It's actually in the trust.
Yeah, I didn't clarify that about filling the holes. I can check on that. Yeah.
It's at the very, very top of the tank itself. But it's a good question, because you don't want that to be a rough spot.
Yeah, right.
And there's only a few. The problem that we had is that there's no standard materials to fit the top of the tank.
The bolt pattern is.
Yeah, you could you could fabricate exactly what's up there now, but you're going to be paying a whole lot more than what you're paying with this and fill every bolt hole.
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. I mean, I think when we all first looked at it years ago, the bolt pattern is not equal. It's random.
Yeah, I'll
But,
check,
I mean,
I'll check
it's
on that.
Equal, and then all of a sudden it jumps.
Huh,
Yeah.
okay. And and their proposal that's dated January 15th only talks about the truss on the outside.
The second piece was added after. That's probably the quote from 58.
I think it's in that, it's in a back paragraph there where it talks about a second one. Because they gave us a price for it. The additional price of 45,000 or so.
Right.
Yeah.
I did see that, but you wonder, it's the same document, why they didn't put it up front.
Because I got that document in different forms, probably 5 times, so they probably just kept adding to what they already had done. That's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, because one of the things also, if you notice, Barbara, the first one, is for a used web.
Which we accepted.
Secondhand.
Which we accepted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
And then the
savings. Yeah.
second one was to infill with new web, partly.
Yes.
Partly? Oh, okay.
Question, just curious, what will be the cost of a brand new tank of that size?
Yeah. So between 2 and 2.5 million.
Is there any value to us in having had that? Is that transferable in any way to anybody else? I mean, it's a big friggin' tank.
You could sell them.
That's my question. Is there value in that?
I'm guessing not much value based on its condition, but we can try.
I mean, selling the existing.
No, if you put in a proper tank,
And then
you
sell
have,
it after.
yeah, you have the ability to sell it afterwards and
Oh,
recoup some of your
oh,
money.
I got, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Penn Jersey had.
A new one years
MT,
ago. Right?
They were looking at a salvage tank to bring in.
That'd be-
Yeah, that was another option.
But
Yeah.
it was still, I don't know what the number was.
Around 500. Yeah.
It was still a lot of money. So.
My
but it
question is-
depreciates
Yeah.
a bit.
But my question is, how much would a brand new tank depreciate? And is it something that we could actually make enough money back?
Ugh.
But you got all the erection charges and the foundation.
I mean, yeah, and a demo of the existing, but Ken? No, I just don't know the answer to that right now. Yeah.
I mean, it just seems like for $100,000 versus 2 million. And you drive the tank off the lot and it's gonna depreciate.
Yeah. That's the way I looked at it, but I hadn't thought about it from Mr. Webb's perspective.
So the way we're talking about is probably doing the right thing to what you're talking about, but I was just trying to see if there was another angle that we could
Yeah.
have value and.
Yeah, I can check on that. I know we have some guys who do it more often. Doesn't happen very often, but they do it more often than me.
Sell it on. All right, so, do we want to defer till Charlie gets back to us, or? I wasn't sure what was going on. So then do we have a motion to approve the change order?
I move that we approve the change order for Penn Jersey.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Austin, if you'll execute that.
All right. Old business, open forum, general discussion on prioritization of policies.
This is kind of an easier discussion, if I dare say. So we wanted to make, I've talked with Mike about this because we have a lot on our plate, obviously. One of the things that, we talked through was coming back and suggesting the policies that staff want to prioritize, but also gauging which ones the board want to, so that we can, align if we're aligned, or add anything in that you feel that we're missing or that you guys want to see prioritized. So for us, the biggest things, and it's a big one, it's the electric tariff. That, for us needs to be updated to bring it up to current, snuff and standards. Staff has already taken a hit at that. I mean, it's a massive 60-page document. I don't believe we've sent it to Mike yet, and Mike will love every minute of reviewing it. And we know that's not going to be a turnkey, I envision that being this year. That's what my hope is, to get that accomplished. The other bigger one that we want to accomplish is the water meter policy. Good.
Is it, will Mike need help on that technically, or is it something mostly just legal documents?
I'm prepared to delve into that with Mike, whether it be with DMEC or through even Sergeant Lundy.
I mean, it's the question. I mean, I would only review for legal purposes.
Yeah.
I offer zero value on electric technicality.
Yeah. No, we had, everybody looked at it. Chris looked at it, Robin looked at it, Kim looked at it, I looked at it. All of our office staff looked at it, Rhett has looked at it. And we've compiled into one red line document with the original and a red line and a clean version that we were gonna send to Mike and his team and start.
Would you send it DMEC first? Would that be a good thing? Because they may have some suggestions that,
We can compare it with DMEC. I mean,
I don't know, Mike, I'm just, what would
Yeah.
make more sense to you? I mean, should it be go through DMEC first or you? I mean, I would think getting the technical thing straightened up and some language that they typically use might make it easier on Mike than.
there's a lot tailored specific to the BPW. That's like billing days. It goes into like standards and specs. It talks about undergrounding and overhead, responsibility, cost sharing.
But I agree with Press. I mean, it was so when it gets to my level, the idea is that all the technical stuff that needs to be in it, that's going to be presented to the board, has been worked out. And then my review is really just making sure legal process procedures make sense, anything that's policy oriented. And then it gets to the board for your further discussion, follow-up questions and whatnot. So I agree, if there's an opportunity as you're vetting the technical stuff, I would do that first.
Is this a service that DMEC offers, or?
I haven't even talked to him yet.
No, I'm
Sure.
just questioning.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether we have to pay for it or whether just being part of the member.
They would probably do that on the member services, but I'm okay with going and having Sergeant Lundy look at it. I mean, it's an
That would be
important document.
expensive that way.
Yeah, it's a very important document though, and it needs to be touched.
So maybe give it to them last.
Yeah, if we want to go down that path.
Yeah, because they're gonna be expensive, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
And then the other one for us is gonna be the water meter and pit policy, which we've discussed
Yeah.
previously. And, we had several comments on, but that's one that we have a red line version that we can send to Mike, and technical wise, there's not much that you can add to it. And it's an existing policy that we would just be amending. Same with the electric tariff. Those are the two big focuses. I mean, there's a lot of policies out there, but what are your feelings? Anything else? I mean, our goal and what we, Mike and I talked through is trying to look at it is there smaller policies that we could do, maybe one or two a board meeting and kind of work through. but we also wanted to provide from a staff level where we wanted to. And that doesn't include the financial stuff that Kim's been working on, which is like the cash reserve policy. Richard's been working on the development agreement amendment. Those would be added into that.
There's obviously a lot out there and it's all important, but you can't do everything at the same time. And so we just want an opportunity, if there is direction from the board where you want staff to prioritize its efforts, that we have that discussion. This is barring recommendation on that. This is what staff's recommending. But you want to make sure periodically check in, because there is a lot out there and it can't all be done at the same time.
Feedback, anything you guys want to add as priorities in individually or as a whole?
Just to clarify on that, so this doesn't have to be a speak now, and
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is the, and this can be a, this is the priority, and then check back in a few months and, hey, maybe you guys should be working on this. Like, yeah, and so I think that's the thing. I think the idea here is to check in. If there's things that the board would like staff to prioritize, that you're verbalizing and presenting that as well.
I guess we don't need, anyway, unless anyone has any objections,
Good. I'm at marching orders.
so forth. Open forum, general discussion on the update for the battery storage options. So, just at a high level, we've been talking with vendors for, I don't even know how many years now.
You want to go all the way back to Alivo?
No, don't want to do that. And, we went through 2 rounds of bidding and none of them were cost effective. We were trying to, and we figured out after the second bid is we were mixing 2 different cases. We were trying to provide redundant power in case we lost power, and also shave the peak to reduce our congestion charges. And there's 2 different requirements on the batteries. To be able to provide redundancy, you need big batteries. And you're not going to use them most of the time. To do peak shaving, you can use smaller batteries, but then you're not going to be able to run like the hospital for any length of time. So we shelved it back then. More recently, the market has stabilized, matured, and we have one of the battery vendors came back and wanted to reopen the topic and educate us. So we've just had a very high level, and we're going to see where that goes and bring it back to the board. Well, it's Austin, myself. What, were you in the original? Who was on the original team? I can't remember. Was it Preston?
I was on.
Oh, okay. But this isn't shit.
I can't do a besides shit.
So actually, I guess we'd want a third person,
So,
a second person.
But what's the advantage of the peak shaving? Do we have to share that with the state, or is that something that we get the total?
Well, not with the state, it was with DMAC, and that's still left to be seen.
A lot comes down to how the agreement would be structured and whether it would be an ownership or if it would be you're allowing them to rent the space and then you get, if they're dabbling in an ancillary market and you want a stake of that ancillary market, a lot of the devil's in the details kind of thing.
But we're looking at the peak shipping. Is that right?
Yes, but actually they DeLorean had brought up that there are several other options that they would like to explore with us.
Okay.
So,
But there's still the extreme of shaving versus
there's-
full redundancy.
the idea of powering, us going on a microgrid, it would be called, where we could separate from the grid and power ourselves off a battery, that's not feasible. Matter of fact, you know, very, very few areas, and the areas that are doing it have large solar or large wind installations, and they're feeding it directly. It doesn't work for us, so,
That was one of my questions. Where is this power coming from? Are we talking about a solar farm in Lewis, or are we
No,
talking about just
buy-
buying
buying
power
it
and?
off- buying it off peak.
Hmm.
The whole purpose is that, you know, what happens is, they go, what is it, Austin, a 1 week period where it's the top 4
Your
days,
coincident peaks.
yeah, top 4 coincident peaks.
I believe it's 5 coincident
Coincident,
peaks.
fine.
Typically, we have a couple in the summer, but the majority are the winter.
So the way the peak charging is done is they look at the last year, look at your 5 coincident highest peaks, and that sets your electric rate for the whole year. 24/7, 365. So if you can clip those peaks, then your entire electric rate structure goes down. And that's a saving to the ratepayers.
What's the amount, approximate amount that we're paying for peaking?
Oh, it's 30% of our,
What, it's a big number.
yeah, it's a
What-
very, very large number.
I think it's, I want to say between transmission and capacity, it was. I'd have to go back and look at the exact number from DMAC, but it was like 30 or 40% of our
Yeah,
bill.
that's what. So the peak shaving is a giant benefit to the customers. And then as Austin pointed out, you know, we would not own the batteries. We would go in with a private-public partnership. And they would use the batteries partly for ancillary, which is, you know, KVR, reactivity, other things on the grid that they would sell into the grid, and that would partially fund how the batteries were being paid for. So it's,
I was gonna say the location that was always being discussed was going to be at Schley Avenue.
yeah. And right on top of our new, oh no,
Oh, yeah. On top of that.
So, you know, this is still in the, you know, we just, matter of fact, Austin was out that day and it was just the battery vendor and myself. And it was nothing more than just an introduction again and getting to learn what the new state of the art is.
So is there anybody that has that in this area that we can go and look at it and
No.
talk to them?
Berlin.
Maryland?
Yeah.
Berlin
But-
does. I shouldn't say it. There's an installation that's coupled with solar in 2 areas in Berlin.
But-
We have equipment out at that site. I don't know if you've seen it. That Alivo, the first people we were dealing with, left. And we actually had a contract, but they folded, but they'd already brought in several transformers.
And, but there are a lot of these being installed throughout the Northeast or throughout the country. And that's one of the things that the battery vendors bring is they've got, so they want to come to us with a basket and say, this is what we could potentially offer.
When you say DeLorean, is there a car that comes with it?
Forget that.
Financing in the same place either.
So the question for the board is, this was a project, this was an effort, that was given a green light before, and when that stalled, it was shelved, it's on the shelf. And now the question is this something that the board would like, staff to kick the tires with Tom, and pull off the shelf and bring back to the board, and take it forward? So that's where the question is at this stage.
And by the way, I'm going to the engineering and operating conference for APPA, and batteries are a big part of that engineering conference. So I'm hoping to learn, you know, more national stuff.
I think it's great.
Yeah,
I think we continue.
I agree.
I think we have a viable,
Yeah.
a lot. But you want to effort it, I think.
I think 30% of people's electric bills is something definitely worthwhile to go after.
I'll be curious what.
30.
provider takes on
Yeah,
this.
when you're using that, that's not 30% of BPW, that's.
Yeah.
You're going to DMEC as a whole, which then,
Well, I'm not sure that we can talk about that.
there's devils in the details.
We got to train the fire department on how to
Oh,
away from that fire if it happens. I'm just saying,
no, I
there's
understand.
challenges, but if you guys want to go after it, absolutely, and hopefully it wins the day.
And you know, my garage has not got fire suppression. I just realized. All right, on a serious note here. Okay, so we have permission to move forward. And next one, open forum, general discussion on wastewater treatment plant, long-range plan, and an update from the wastewater treatment plant contingency committee. So, on the wastewater treatment plant, we're still kind of holding ground. There's a lot of things in motion and nothing seems to be solidifying. So at this point, it's kind of a wait and see. And I really do know that we need to have another public workshop. We haven't had one, we're doing it monthly, but right now, there's absolutely nothing to report. So, I apologize for not, we're doing a monthly there for a while. And hopefully in the next couple of months, things will break loose and we'll have a path forward. And at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Barbara.
Okay, well, the wastewater treatment contingency committee is authorized by the board through the end of January. So we've been scrambling, putting together a report of our findings, and we'll be presenting that to the board at the special meeting on Monday, the 29th, right?
What time is the meeting?
10 a.m.
10 a.m.
10 a.m. And that kind of winds down the committee unless, the board decides there's more to be done. But
And so I really want to commend.
it's been a great experience.
The
with
committee
people.
has put on
Yeah.
an unbelievable amount of effort. And they have really turned over every stone or every cow pie. I don't remember which. And
More like cow pie.
so, Barbara, really thank you and everyone else on the committee. So,
Okay, we're looking forward
and
to.
so stay tuned Monday.
And I hope to get a draft report. I can't get the whole report out without Sharon, but I hope to get a draft report out to the board this weekend. But I'll
You'll be
email.
back on Friday.
Oh, she's back on Friday?
Yeah, and so, what Barbara and I discussed is to make sure that we had a chance, those of us who are not sitting on the committee.
Yeah.
To review, it's a 25-page document before the meeting. Even if it's draft and, if it's got tables that aren't necessarily critical, they can be, to be delivered later. And then they can keep track of red line editing and go forward from there. But, I thought it was important that the board have a chance to, so don't plan anything for Sunday night. Or,
Football. I have it.
all right,
No.
all right. Call to the public. Do we have any public?
No public.
Call to the press.
I had a question, but Earl asked it about an hour ago, so about water.
All right. So at that point, we have a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,